Hey friends! So my family and I took a little trip to Georgia, and I managed to steal a couple of hours for some sketching. And of course I thought, why not film it and share it with you? Outdoor sketching is such a cool topic, drawing from life, feeling the place. Even though the word sketch usually means something quick and simple, it still scares a lot of people off, especially beginners. Honestly, most of my students are kind of afraid to go outside and draw from real life. They stick to reference photos for a long time, thinking, oh, drawing from nature, that's too hard for me. Well, in this video, I want to break that fear down and show you the key things that can help you feel more confident about sketching on location. We'll be drawing in a park, lots of green, lots of trees, a pretty typical scene, and one many of you will probably recognise. We'll talk about how to avoid making that classic flat green wall look, and instead, how to bring depth and volume into a forest landscape. But first, let's start with the materials. So, since I'm travelling with my family, I didn't want to carry a huge kit. I went with my compact travel setup, a tiny watercolor box that literally looks like a makeup mirror, an A5 size watercolor pad, and a small set of brushes. I'll talk more about the brushes later while we're painting. Now, for this landscape, I was inspired by these massive pine trees. I'm not sure if the scale really comes through on camera, but in real life, they're seriously impressive. And I'll try to capture that in the sketch. When you're choosing a scene to draw, don't just look at it logically, like, okay, there's a tree, there's a house. Think about how it feels. What caught your eye? Why did you stop here? That emotional connection will make your sketch so much more expressive. Before diving into the actual piece, I like doing a couple of quick mini sketches, kind of a warm-up. Sure, you could just snap a photo instead. But let's be real, that's not nearly as fun or useful. One goal of these tiny sketches is to help you pick your composition. When we look at a landscape, there's just so much going on. It's easy to get overwhelmed, so narrowing it down helps a ton. I tried 2 layouts here, one horizontal, one vertical. And, spoiler alert, I picked the vertical one. It really helped me show the height of the trees, which felt more impactful than trying to go wide and include too much space. That way the composition feels more focused and intentional. At this stage, I'm also figuring out the height relationships between the elements. I've got a few trees up front and some more in the background, and I need to understand how tall those background trees should be so that the whole scene still looks believable. Pay attention to size relationships, because here's the thing. Our eyes, or rather our brains, adapt to what we see. We tend to focus on each object individually, trying to capture the shape, but we often forget to relate their sizes to each other, and that's how we lose depth and perspective in a sketch. Same goes for tone. If we want our sketch to have depth and a sense of volume, we don't need to render every detail perfectly, but we do need the tones to work together. What helps here is stepping back and asking yourself, okay, what's the darkest part of this scene? What's the lightest? That contrast is key. If you're also working with colour, look at colour relationships too. I'll talk more about how I evaluate that a little later. So, I pick my reference, taking one last look, and now I'm moving on to a larger sheet to start the main sketch. It's still a sketch, though. Don't get scared off by that. It doesn't have to be perfect. I begin with a pencil drawing, and because I already sorted out the proportions in the small thumbnails, I can sketch pretty freely. Yep, I still use a pencil. Nothing wrong with that. Then I start adding colour. Let's talk about the palette now. We already discussed tonal contrast earlier, so now I'm thinking again. Where are the darkest areas? If you look closely, the deepest shadows are often right under the trees, especially when it's sunny. And in my case, it was a very sunny day. The light kept shifting, but I decided to stick with a strong sunny setup. So I'm adding those rich dark tones under the trees, sometimes nearly black. Now let's talk about the classic green wall problem. You know what I mean, right? Even in a photo, all the green just blends together into this flat, uniform, green mass. That's what I call the green fence. But in real life, it doesn't feel that flat. We can tell which trees are which. Here's a fir, there's a poplar, something else further back. That's why painting from life is so powerful. You can see those subtle differences. But even if you're still working from a photo, and that's okay, you can break up the green mess using colour temperature and shifts in hue. Like here, I've got a poplar in the background that's a bit warmer, more yellowish, because it's catching more light. And then I've got these darker pine trees. Let's just call them firs for now. They feel cooler, more bluish green. Just that little variation already helps separate the layers of the forest. So, those tall fir trees. Yeah. I made them a bit cooler in tone, and I'm intentionally painting them in a slightly different colour to make them stand out. If you've been sketching with me for a while, you probably already know. I'm not a huge fan of pre-mixed greens. Those ready-made green shades can trick you into thinking, oh great, I've got green paint, I'm good to go. But in reality, they flatten your work and kill the mood. That's why I always recommend mixing your own greens. That way you've got options, cooler greens, warmer ones, more vibrant, more muted, dirty earthy greens, deeper darks. You name it. Anyway, I've sketched in the background now, added the light spots where the sun hits the trees up front. I'm leaving gaps of white between them for now. Some of those will be filled in later with darker colours. It's just easier to shape a fir tree when the silhouette of the light is already there. I'll be adding the trunks and branches later, at the very end. When you're painting trees, it helps to pick a technique or a specific brush stroke. Different trees have different textures. And how you paint them can totally change the vibe of your sketch. These tall firs, for example, have these big rough branches, so I'm painting more loosely, with confident strokes. Now, about brushes. For outdoor sketching, I really like using synthetic brushes. They're great for small, quick work like this. Here, I also used a waterbrush, but without actually squeezing much water out of it. I only add water when I really need to, because for such a small format, too much water can mess things up. It also depends on the weather. Today it's pretty humid. It just rained, so the last thing I need is extra moisture on the page. Up front, I added a little lake, Just a soft wash with some reflections using clean water. Quick tip: it's not a great idea to over-render every single detail in a sketch. Keep things simple. Simplicity is a superpower in sketching. Try practicing with minimal shapes, limited colour palettes, no overthinking, just quick decisions. It'll help you work faster, stay relaxed, and make your art feel more alive. Now, my first version of this painting, honestly, it felt a little dry. I wasn't loving it. The colours of the fir trees looked kind of flat to me. So I thought, hey, why not try again? Let's go wetter, looser, and just play a bit. Unfortunately, I didn't get to finish that second version. Mom life hit hard. I ended up painting with my baby in my arms, but I still wanted to show you what it looked like, because it came out a lot more vibrant and juicy. In that version, I worked wet on wet right from the start. Then I added a bit of pencil on top, just to define some forms, to make it look more like actual trees and not just random green blobs. I didn't have a brown pencil on me, only this reddish-brown one. So my tree trunks ended up kind of red. Oops. But hey, it's still a good experiment. These kinds of sketches really help you develop your sense of light and composition. They teach you to see the big picture and think in shapes and values. So my advice: build yourself a little travel kit and go on mini art adventures from time to time. Summer's just getting started. And trust me, by the end of it, you'll be so glad you did.